Hey Jackie, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. So today we have a very special guest. Her name is Jackie Cummings Koski, and she has a very special story to tell. She actually became a millionaire prior to turning 50 years old. She fired. She could have fired well before 50, but she chose to work a couple extra years. So we're gonna kind of listen to her story today. I'm super excited to speak with you today, Jackie. Why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself to whoever's listening now live and whoever's going to tune in later on YouTube?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Rashad, and congrats to you on the channel and bringing on some amazing guests. I feel honored to kind of just be hanging out with you tonight. So, as you mentioned, my name is Jackie Cummings Koski. I grew up, in South Carolina, down a dirt road. I was raised by a single dad with 6 kids, so it was a very interesting upbringing. We were very poor, but I can say that my dad was very hardworking. He taught us a lot of great work ethics. And so that's kind of where my story begins. I remember when I was really close to graduating from high school, he actually got cancer and he passed away. So that was kind of my introduction into adulthood because I was barely 18 at the time. But I did go to college. After college, I got married, had a daughter, and everything was going good for quite some time. I was married for 11 years and then we got divorced. So at that point, I became a single mom and that changed my whole world. And so from that point on, that there was many things that happened during the divorce that was a wake up call for me financially. So after I started getting things together, and it took a couple years because for anyone that's been divorced, you know that it's not something to take lightly. It's very emotional. It's very draining. So it took about 1 or 2 years for me to kind of pull it together to say, okay, what next? I'm a single mom now. I got to make sure I'm going to be okay. I got to make sure my daughter's going to be okay. So at that point, one of the first things that I did, one of the first actions that I thought was kind of moving me in the right direction was I joined an investment club. And when I did that, the biggest thing was that I wasn't afraid of the stock market anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I was learning about something I was very interested in. And that started me down the path of, okay, I should be maxing out my 401k. I should be maxing out my Roth IRA. So it helped me start out with some really good habits sort of in my new life. And fast forward about 10 years or so, I started hearing about the fire community. And that put everything in a more clear picture for me. And when I didn't do my first net worth until I was 38 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did that, that was one of the most important things I had done in terms of knowing where I was financially. And so I was able to come up with my FI number, my net worth, and discovered, I think I was in my mid 40s, but discovered I was really close to getting to where I could retire. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't quite ready. So like you said, I took a couple more years, still worked for my corporate job. I didn't hate my job. I actually liked my boss. I liked my coworkers. I liked my company. But I decided to work a couple more years and to kind of design what I wanted things to look like when I actually retired. And so in 2019, I finally pulled the trigger. I retired early. And at that point, I was ready to kind of talk a little bit more about my journey, which is what I've done because I'd love to share it with as many people as would love to hear it. So that's kind of the short version.
Yeah, so that's some good background information. And I know you are very transparent. I've seen so many of your seminars and videos that you have done on the internet. Why don't we back up a little bit? I know you said that you had quite a 5 siblings, correct? Where do you fall in line?
Well, won't you guess? No, no, I'm not the baby. Okay. I'm
I
not the
was gonna say
oldest.
almost in the middle, second or third.
Kind of. I have one younger sister. Her name is Gwen. One sister younger than me. Everybody else is older. So I was number 5 out of 6.
Got it. Okay, so you grew up very poor in
We
in
did. We
poverty.
Yeah, my dad actually worked at a jean factory, and in the South back then, textile mills were the big thing. So he worked at a textile mill, and he only had a sixth grade education. So even though he worked his butt off and everything, you're only going to make so much doing that, and then add to that 6 mouths to feed. Yeah, barely made ends meet. Like I was on the free lunch program. Uh, However, I could say I think that's the only type of public assistance that I remember us being on. Like we weren't on welfare. I don't remember us ever getting food stamps or anything like that. And I think for my dad, it was a pride thing. We
Mhm.
might have come out better if we had some of these social services, but the only thing I ever remember getting was the free lunch program at school.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So what was your relationship like with money back then?
It was just lack of. Um, I wore a lot of hand-me-downs, and we didn't go shopping for clothes, never went to restaurants or anything like that. Um, we lived in a two and a half bedroom ranch home, 7 people in one home. Just everything was short. I wasn't able to get the newest jeans. I wasn't able to do a lot of things because money. We don't have that
Mhm.
kind of money. We can't buy this. We can't buy that. So it was always just not having enough.
Oh, gotcha. So let's walk back to high school. You graduated high school. What came after that?
So high school, I was always actually a pretty good student in high school. Like my favorite class was like English, literature, and journalism.
Mhm.
So I was able to get good enough grades. I was doing A's and B's in school. I was in the advanced classes and things like that in high school. So I was able to get into one of the local colleges, actually Augusta State University. So I lived in South Carolina, but that's right on the border of Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah.
So I would just drive to school every day. And so um, I did okay in school, but I knew I was capable of doing much better. And the reason why I didn't was because, I'm having to pay my own way through school. Okay, I got a little bit of grant money, a little bit of scholarships, but as all that, it's not going to cover everything. So the entire time I was in college, I had to work full time plus. So an average week for me was like 50 hours a week working 2 jobs. And then I took a full load at school, a full load of classes. And I think at the time that was like 3 to 4 classes per semester. So my grade, something had to give. So my grades suffered.
Oh.
And I think the lowest GPA you could have and actually graduate was like a 2.5. And my
Mhm.
GPA was a 2.6. So I barely got out of college. But, if I didn't work, I couldn't even pay for my classes.
Yeah.
So it was a lesson in life more than anything. So I learned more from trying to balance my time and money while I was in school versus what I was learning inside the classroom. So yeah, that was kind of the college experience, after high school. It was tough, but I did graduate, and I wasn't very proud of my grades, but I was so thrilled when I knew that your GPA was not on your graduation diploma.
Yeah, you get the degree, but it doesn't have like a 2.6 or anything.
That's right. I thought I would never ever have to revisit it again. I got through. I got my 2.6. I'm done. Now I can make some decent money. That was my main goal. Is the fact that I knew once I got my college degree, I would more than likely make a higher salary and not be in poverty again.
That's great. So this was prior to the online learning. How'd you pull
Yeah,
it off? Like now people can work full time and take classes online, but how did you do both at the same time?
maybe getting about 3 or 4 hours of sleep a
Oh,
night, and then friends that didn't have to do what I did that would beg me to go out with them and stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
So I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I did that, but pretty much every day I was doing something. So I had a full-time job, and then I had like a part-time job. Maybe I worked 2 or 3 days a week, but so I was working 7 days a week, plus taking 4 hours of class, and praying that my smarts would get me through the test and get me at least a C in the class, because I wasn't able to put in a whole lot of time to study. So I didn't get to enjoy the experience like I wanted to. Like I wasn't able to join a sorority. I probably would have been a part of student governing association, maybe a cheerleader. There was a lot of other activities that
Mhm.
I probably would have done had I had more time. But I didn't have that luxury. So I was just happy to get out of school.
And at this point in time, you weren't necessarily, you were still in survival mode. So you weren't thinking about saving money or anything like that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was younger, and I tell this story sometimes because I was saving when I didn't even realize I was saving, but I got a $2 bill when I was in high school, and for some reason I thought that it was special. So I would hold on to that $2 bill. And then every time I got paid, I would go to the bank, and I would, back then you got paid a physical check and you have to go to the bank
Yeah.
to deposit it. And so I would save these $2 bills. And before I knew it, it added up, like through high school and college. And by the time I was, an adult, my daughter was, a teenager. I think I finally counted them because I kept collecting these $2 bills. I ended up with like $3,200 worth of $2 bills. It was crazy. But that made me think, oh, I guess I was saving something. Even though it was really, really small, I did. But besides that, all I had was maybe a little bit of an emergency fund that was maybe like $500. Like if I had a tire blowout or I needed something fixed on my car, I couldn't be out. So I did have, I guess, the enough foresight to have a little bit of an emergency fund because, at that point, my dad had passed away. I really didn't have anyone else in my family, anyone else that would be able to come to my rescue, right? And say, okay, you can borrow $100 or I can help you with this. I always felt like it was just me, and I didn't have the luxury of being able to rely on someone else, even my family. So
Understood. Okay, so you take care of your degree, you get a job. What kind of work did you do at that point?
Oh gosh. So my main job was I worked at a Walmart store. I actually did office work. So I did like what do you call it? Like a job share. So someone did the office work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And then I was sort of her backup, but I would work 3 days a week, 8 hours a day. And then I would work every Saturday and Sunday. And then I worked at a sub shop, and that was right up the street from my college. So 2 days a week that I wasn't working at Walmart, I would work there for like 4 hours. And so those were my main 2 jobs when I was in college. And Walmart worked out pretty good because obviously they're a big corporation. And my first real job out of college was working for Walmart headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, where I was able to, be in my field. And that was communications and like corporate communications. That's what I did for them.
Got it. So after that, you begin your career and then you ultimately get married.
Yeah.
Tell us about that whole situation with, marriage and divorce and becoming a single mom.
Yeah. So I met my ex-husband when I was in college. So apparently I was squeezing in time to date. So
dating, working.
Yeah. So we didn't get married so he was in the military. He was in the Army. And so I met him when he was in the Army. I was in college. And I remember I did graduate from college, and like I said, my first job out of college was at Walmart headquarters. So I moved all the way from, Augusta, Georgia to Bentonville, Arkansas. And we still stayed in touch. He got deployed like overseas for a year or 2. We still, stayed together, and we got married while I was in Arkansas. He was still in the military. And I remember, when he got out of the military, our biggest concern was his career after the military, because I knew I could move with Walmart anywhere. And so we ended up, he got a job in Ohio. And so I ended up moving with him and just started working at, one of the Walmart locations in Ohio. And as soon as I moved to Ohio, that's when I discovered I was pregnant. So my daughter was born in Ohio, and so that's what brought me here. But we were, becoming a new mom and everything, that was great. And trying to, decide my career and what we were going to do in terms of, were we going to stay in Ohio? We did end up staying in Ohio. And we were married for, like I said, about 11 years. And we ended up getting a divorce. And that was a huge, pivotal moment in my life and my daughter's life and his life as well. So that changed the game right there. And that was a big moment that sort of changed the whole trajectory of where I was going. So.
Well, okay. So, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw somewhere, I believe that you both made similar money, but when you got divorced, you might have had $20,000 in retirement. He had almost 5 or 6 times that. Why don't you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Rashad, I was embarrassed by that for a long time because I thought I should know better. I thought there should have been better communication. No matter what, it just had a very negative connection to it for me. And as time goes on, I just realized that was, even though it was a negative thing, it did help me sort of move in the right direction financially. But basically, whenever you get divorced, especially if you've been married for at least 10 years, what normally happens is that all of the retirement money goes into one pot and it gets split down the middle.
Mhm.
So in our case, we really didn't have a whole lot of assets. The house barely had any equity. We had, debt on the cars and stuff like that. So the only real asset we had was our 401ks. And we were making, very similar salaries. I think towards the end, maybe the last few years, he was making a little bit more than me, but it wasn't like I was a teacher and he was a doctor, right?
Mhm.
So we
Yeah.
were very similar. Okay. So I looked at my retirement account, my 401k at my company, and I had about $20,000. And at this point, I'm like 34, 35, something like that. And I'm thinking that's pretty good. I just I didn't know in relation to everyone else how that was doing. I thought it was good. And so my husband, his 401k had $120,000 in it. So he had $100,000 more than me. And I'm thinking, how did that happen? Now, over time, I have sort of reconstructed what probably happened. I mean, basically, when we were married, everything was in one pot. Like
Mhm.
we weren't doing different things with our money. It all came in and we managed it from there. So even though maybe a little bit more of his money was going into his 401k, I was taking care of more of the household bills and things like that. But it didn't really matter, right? Because it was going in
Yeah.
one pot. So you don't
Yeah.
really look at that. And then on top of that, he was working for a big bank. And at the time, most companies don't do this anymore. But at the time, he had the company's stock, the bank stock, inside of his 401k. And this was probably around 2002, 2003, 2004. So banks were doing exceptionally well. So that was a
Mhm.
big part of his 401k and it was growing like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Up until, 2008 happened
Yeah.
and then the banks went crazy. But it was just, a matter of timing and stuff like that. So there was a lot of little things that added up. And the other thing it reminded me of is that the value of compound growth during
Mhm.
that 10 or 11-year period, it's amazing how much his grew versus mine. It really wasn't one big thing. It was just the little things that started to compound over time. And over a 10-year period, it was making this big difference. So that's what happened. And again, that was probably one of my biggest wake up calls financially because I just never wanted to be that financially vulnerable again. So I vowed at that point to learn about my finances, learn about investing, learn about saving, taxes, all of those things that I wish I had known a lot sooner.
That's very interesting. In my situation, so I'll probably bring in about 65% of our income, but we look at it the same, like it's
Right.
one pot. So literally, my wife and I, we have the same amount of retirement money.
Right.
403Bs, Ross, we put the same amount in each month. It doesn't matter how much I make, is in reference
Yeah.
or in relation to how much she makes. So, you weren't really as aware as you probably wish you were at the time,
Right. Right.
but obviously you had a lot of time to do reflection and you see now, hey, I could have probably done better. But at the end of the day, everything was split down the middle and you were able to walk away with the same exact amount,
Right.
correct?
Yeah, and it settled out to be about $60,000 is what I got, from his 401k. But I guess another thing for us, and some people are on second and third marriages, and they've already got assets and things. But when we both got together, we both had a lot of debt. That's it, and we both grew up poor. So it wasn't like one person came to the marriage with more than the other. Everything
Yeah.
that we had, we created together at that point. So I guess from a judge's perspective, that's the fair thing to do, especially considering that one, we have a child, and two, we were married for 11 years. Now, if you're somebody where you've been married for 2 years and one person, so
Yeah.
the scenario that we had, and my husband never had an issue with it, and it was a fair thing to do. And when you think about it, $60,000 is not a whole lot of money. I mean, over time, it has grown, of course, but to start out with that at the age of 35, 36, that's really not a whole lot to begin with, but it's what we had. And the fair thing was to, split it up, because I can't go back and say, oh, I paid the whole mortgage this month, give me half of your you can't do that. So that's really the only logical thing to do.
So is it true what they say that, divorce is like one of the most devastating
It is.
financial things that ever happens to someone? And it's usually, followed by a bankruptcy. Did that happen, or were you able to figure it out and not file bankruptcy?
Yeah, we didn't have bankruptcy. We didn't have a ton of debt. I mean, there was a mortgage and stuff like that, but nothing crazy. So I'm thankful for that. So even though we both grew up poor, we built some things together that helped us both. And I was very happy that at least my daughter had that, where she's got two stable parents that love her very much, that are going to be okay. We never had to file bankruptcy. Nobody had any crazy credit card debt or anything like that. So those were things, I guess, that, we did do right together, because it could have been much, much worse. So I guess, upon reflection, it wasn't the worst thing. And I do know people that have had to file for bankruptcy, or they end up with a lot of debt. And God forbid, child custody issues with the kids. We never really dealt with that. That to me is even a more valuable piece, to make sure your child is as intact as possible, because they're kind of going through the divorce too.
It's good that you all had that cordial relationship, a relationship that was still built on respect, because there are definitely nightmares out there where you get a divorce and you're fighting for years to try to get a little bit more money than you would have gotten. So that's good that you did have that relationship with him where you could work that out. You divorce, now you got to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
When you talk about finances, how did that look? And what was your next move? How did you finally get to the point where you discovered the FIRE movement?
Well, so at this point, as I mentioned, it took about 2 years for me to kind of get my head straight, right? The emotional part of a divorce definitely takes its toll. And I'm a firm believer of the behavioral and the emotional side of finances. So you got to get yourself together before you can start to, I guess, take action and actually make some move. So for me, that was about 2 years. And one of the first things I did, for some reason, I always liked investing, and I was curious about the stock market, but I was kind of scared of it, but I wanted to do it the right way. Again, now I'm not just thinking about myself, I'm thinking about my daughter. And I don't have anyone else that really I can depend on in that way. I always looked at it like, okay, it's me and my daughter, and I need to make sure we're okay. So what are the right things to do? So I ended up, I was talking to actually a friend that I was in Ohio working at our headquarters of the company, and she was in Boston. And we were talking one day, and we're talking about stocks. And she was saying something about this, well, there's this nonprofit organization called Better Investing, and they support investment clubs all over the country. And I'm sure they have one in Ohio. You should Google it. So I Googled it, and I was able to find a local investment club that you can just go and be a guest. And so I was more curious than anything else. So I went to a few meetings. They were talking about very comfortably about the stock market, about analyzing great companies, and making investment decisions. And I just love the conversation. So I went to probably meetings for about 6 months. They met, once a month. I could go. I think I might have gone to 3 or 4 meetings over a 6-month period. And so I decided to join the investment club.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I did that, I was now adjacent and in close proximity to other people that was very interested in the things that I was interested in. I would say this is probably the first time that I realized how important community was to me, getting with like-minded people. Yep. And so, and not only did we have our investment club, and we did what we did in the investment club, it mainly focused on individual companies, just some deep dive analysis. But it helped me become more comfortable with the stock market. Mm-hmm. It helped me realize the value of compound growth, and just looking at, the history of the stock market. It's always, even though it goes down sometimes over long periods of time, it always goes up. Yep. So I said, okay, I need to make sure I look at my 401k and make sure I'm maxing that out. I need to put me in, what other places can I put tax advantage money? And yep. So that's when I started learning about, the health savings account. I started maxing that out. Anywhere I could get tax advantage money, that's where I started. I had my investment club, and then I might have had a little bit of like in a regular brokerage account. But that was the start of sort of my financial awakening in terms of what I needed to do with my money. And as time goes on, I would listen to a bunch of personal finance podcasts. That was just my way of consuming information, either a podcast or YouTube, right? I
Yeah.
love YouTube. I'm an audible and a visual person. So I would listen to, back then, there was probably only maybe 5 personal finance podcasts. And I noticed they were becoming more and more and more. And then there was all these little niches underneath the personal finance umbrella, and FIRE was one of them. And that
Mhm.
started sounding more like what I was interested in doing. But I never, ever would, like, at that point, my idea of ever retiring early was maybe 55, because you could leave. I learned that you could leave if you had a 401k and you left the company when you were 55 years old or older, you could start, using, you could start withdrawing the money in your account and you could live on it. So that's what I thought. And then I started learning all these cool things about, Mad Scientist was my guy. I just loved how
Yeah,
to explain
me too.
things. So that's how I was kind of introduced to the FIRE community, mainly listening to podcasts, maybe watching YouTube videos. And I finally did my first net worth. I finally figured out what my FI number was. I finally figured out ways that you were able to get money out of your retirement account even before you're 59 and a half. So all these things I was learning, and I finally was able to pull it all together to where, I finally knew what I was doing and started creating a strategy around that.
Okay, so before we get into actual investments and investment vehicles, there's somebody that's watching this for the first time and they have not heard of FIRE. Can you explain in your own words what FIRE is?
Yes, because when I was new to FIRE, it was so confusing for me. So thank you for clarifying that. So FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And it's not necessarily a new concept, but the acronym does get people a lot more interested. And the whole idea of being able to not be tied to a company and depending on a paycheck that someone else is giving you, you create space in your life. So the FI part, the financial independence part, almost everyone would want that in their life. And that simply means that you have enough investments to be able to live off of and not have to depend on a paycheck. You've got enough passive income, whether that's through real estate, the stock market, or whatever. That's your paycheck is coming from this nest egg that you've created. And the retire early part, some people may not want to do that. For me, it was important that I did retire early because what I wanted to do had nothing to do with my job at my company. So I wanted to teach financial literacy, financial education, because for me as a little Black girl from South Carolina to go from poverty to becoming financial literate, financially educated, and reaching financial independence, and also retiring like decades early than I was supposed to, I wanted to share that. I wanted to be a voice for that. I wanted to touch as many people as possible to say, hey, I think this is possible for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole FIRE acronym is very cool. I actually like that they call it FIRE because it does attract a lot of people. And if that's what gets you in the door, then fine. But
Yeah.
once you start to realize that this can be done a bunch of different ways, it just changes your mind just a little bit to know that retirement isn't just for 70-year-olds, and you get to define what retirement looks like. But at minimum, for you to be financially independent, when you don't have to depend on a paycheck from a job, that is extremely powerful.
That's really good information. It's a good definition of FIRE. I want to give a quick shout out to my man, Don Johnson. He is definitely an avid supporter of this channel, and he is in our Facebook group, Afros on Fire. So go
Yeah.
check
Hey,
him
Don.
out. He's super supportive of this channel. I don't know if you had an opportunity, we all know who Our Rich Journey is, but they did a video recently. They retired
Yeah.
around 39 and 40.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a video about, their why for FIRE. And it was like, they took their time back. Like
Right.
they didn't talk about money or anything. They didn't talk about the things they could buy. They just talked about being able to walk their daughters to school or
Right.
make breakfast or make lunch. And it was pretty powerful, and I was talking to Julian from Rich and Regular and his wife Kirsten, and one of the things we were talking about was why is money so taboo? Why is talking
Right.
about money so taboo, particularly in the African American community? And we trying to figure out, like, does a lot of it have to do with our upbringing, where a lot of us do grow up without money, and when somebody does start to kind of break free and get that money, they just have a hard time talking about it because
Right.
others might be uncomfortable. Why don't you tell us about that? Like, I know you are a super open book. Like,
Right.
it's not taboo to you, but why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it probably was for a long time. My dad definitely wasn't talking to me about this is what I'm paying on a mortgage, or I can't pay the light bill. He wasn't talking to us about that. And most people growing up, especially like you said in the African American community, they're not telling you about all that. And for me personally, there's just a lot of shame around it. Like, I couldn't have the newest jeans, right, when I was in school. There's so many things I couldn't do when I would hear other people talking about it. So I didn't want to say that, I was poor, didn't have any money, and it just wasn't a cool thing to talk about. So yeah, I just saw the video from Rich and Regular, and it was so beautifully done. I have to tell you, that's probably the best video I've ever seen talking about fire. I thought it was amazing. And then, of course, Rich and Regular, we all love them. They're always putting out amazing content. So, kudos to the, Black content creators that are trying to share the story, because sometimes I feel like we're kind of we're late to the table, but, it's on us to share it. And I guess that's part of why I don't want to keep it a secret. I'm more than happy to share all of my numbers. And I feel like it could help people to start to look at, hey, my situation is exactly like hers, but here's where I can tweak. Like, when I was, looking at other people's numbers or seeing their situation, it was always hard for me when they would leave out certain things or not give me enough detail, because it was hard for me to make the little tweaks and adjustments I needed to make if I didn't have all the information. So the content creators that were, showing, this is what my budget looks like, and here's the income that we have coming in. My wife makes 80, I make 80, that's 160. Well, that's very different for me. And I can learn from those
Yeah,
people, but I know I need to make some tweaks, but I don't know what tweaks I need to make unless I kind of get certain questions answered. So I said, whenever I, start to share my story, I just throw up my hands and say, what do you want to know? I want to just share whatever numbers you're curious about. It shouldn't be a secret. Nobody can spend your money but you anyway. And
that's a
I'm
good
doing it
point.
in the name of education. I'm an educator. You're an educator as
Yeah,
well, but I'm an educator at heart. And that's always the perspective in which I'm coming from. So
absolutely. And I like to be transparent as well. I like to be open. One of the unintended consequences of that is that, if I'm sharing a story or a
right.
success or a celebration, and, inevitably I get hit up on Facebook. Somebody asked me for $50. Just people I hadn't talked to
Oh,
in
really?
30 years. I'll be like, man, where'd that come from? So
Right.
yeah,
Oh,
but
wow.
I would rather be transparent with people and let them
Right.
know, like, hey man, you make 50,000 a year, but if you take these particular steps, you can
Right.
be successful with money. So, what, obviously, if you make $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, it's easier to become a millionaire if you take the necessary steps. And somebody make it 20,000 a year, but you never made six figures, did you?
No, no. So what I did when I retired, I went back 10 years and I took what I made each year. Now, I was in sales,
Mhm.
so my income fluctuated. Like, I would get, bonuses sometimes, it would depend on commission. So it was variable. So I went back and I took the last 10 years of my total compensation and I averaged it out. And it came to about $80,000 a year for the last 10 years that I worked. No single year did I ever make over $100,000. So I never broke six figures, and I'm a single mom. Now, when my daughter was under 18, I did get child support. The child support was somewhere around 800. That was obviously supposed to be used for, things for my daughter. But, that gave me a little bit of play. But yeah, I never made over six figures, from my job. And honestly, I don't know that that was even a goal of mine, because I didn't have a desire to like move up in corporate America. For a while, I thought something was wrong with me because that wasn't the track I was on, and I wasn't interested in that. My priority especially after I got divorced, I didn't want to have to travel a lot. I wanted to try to be more available for my daughter. I was juggling a lot of things. So, I could have made a lot more money if I decided, I was in sales at headquarters. If I wanted to be like in the field or something, I could have made almost double what I was making, but that wasn't the priority. And that really wasn't my desire. And I just thought, gee, if I can just be smarter with the money I have, looking at things like taxes, investments, tax advantage accounts, doing those things right or better could help me along versus just, trying to chase the money and, traveling all the time or, working hard. I just wanted to work smart.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's some people that's gonna say, oh, even $80,000 a year is a lot of money, right? But I know people that make way more than that, and unfortunately, they're not good with their money because they've never been taught. They've never been taught, and books like The Millionaire Next Door, those kind of things really like taught me. It doesn't, Jackie might not look like a millionaire, but she's a millionaire. So I don't look like a millionaire. We on the way. So it's just millionaires. They don't have a big tag that says millionaire on it.
Exactly. And you don't stop doing the things you were doing to get to becoming a millionaire. You don't just stop doing those things. And you're right about the $80,000. I guess part of the reason why I say the number is because it depends where you're at. Okay, if you're in San Francisco or if you're in New York City, you're probably laughing at me right now saying $80,000. That's peanuts. Okay, but if you're in Iowa, then yeah, that's a lot of money. So it depends on where you're at. And that was another thing that, was very confusing for me. When somebody says, we made a decent salary. Well, what is that? If I live in Iowa, that's one number. If I live in New York City, that's another number. So here's the number, and you can choose, you can be able to make your decisions or your impressions based on that, on whether or not you consider it high income or low income.
Got it. I totally agree 100% with you. So whatever your income was, if it was 61 year, 91 year, what are some of the investment vehicles that you used? And within those vehicles, how did you invest? I know you said you were part of investment clubs. I'm more of an index fund person. I don't really fool around too much with individual stocks. I'm almost 100% VTSAX, which is a total stock market fund. But why don't you talk a little bit about those investments?
Yeah. So for me, the investment club was mostly about analyzing individual companies. And I did discover that I do like being an owner of great companies. My biggest holding is Apple, but I do things like, since I retired, especially I get to do this, but going to annual meetings, listen to quarterly conference calls, kind of looking at the research and development and what the company's doing. So I have that little piece that I happen to be interested in, but the truth of the matter is most people are better off just doing a straight up index fund, unless you're nerdy like me and you love analyzing companies, because there is some work that goes into it, but I don't see it as work because it's something that I enjoy. And the majority of my investable assets are straight up index funds as well. So I would say probably 80 to 85% of my investments are in low cost index funds, and about 10 to 15% is individual companies. So even though I love that, I know that I want to be more diversified with just, index funds as well. So so when I started learning a little bit about taxes, I still don't feel like I did as good as I could have done, but I started looking at, okay, what accounts are tax advantage? Because I had a brokerage account for a long time, getting these, end of the year statements with all these different stocks that I've traded. It's like, that was annoying. So once you get it into a tax advantage account, a retirement account, like that's going to be your IRA, 401k, and things like that, you don't have to worry about the statement, because as long as the money and the funds is inside of those types of accounts, you don't have to worry about getting a tax statement or anything like that. So I thought that made it easy for me. So most of my tax advantage account pointed to my employer. So the first thing was my 401k. I was doing just the company match, for a long time. So I can say this, even when I barely knew what I was doing, I knew what direction to move in. So I knew it was good to contribute to your 401k, at least do the match. So I was doing that. So it wasn't like I was doing nothing, but I started maxing out my 401k. I started, now I had a Roth IRA for a while. I mean, the limits for those, when I started, I think was like maybe 4,500, 5,000 or whatever, but I was maxing that out. So those are two good accounts immediately that had different tax treatment. I kind of like that. And then I started learning about a health savings account.
Mhm.
And, that's a very, specific thing that depending on your family makeup and your use of healthcare, whether or not, having a high deductible plan with a health savings account will work for you. But here's what it did for me. So I was always, my premiums for the health insurance I had at work I thought was still kind of high. And
Mhm.
so when they introduced these high deductible health plans that had a very low premium, the low
Yeah.
premium was way more attractive to me because even when my deductible was $500, I never even came close. Me and my daughter would go for one wellness visit a year, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, give me the plan that's only $100 a month versus $500 a month, and then I'll take the difference and max out my health savings account. So I just felt like I was throwing away money for a long time with health insurance. So I love this model. And again, because I was comfortable with the stock market, I love the idea that I can invest in it once it hit a certain amount. And I already had an emergency fund aside from my health savings account. So, there could have been an accident that happened. There could have been an illness where I needed that money. That's what that health savings account is for, is to bridge the gap between a traditional deductible versus a higher deductible. So
Mhm.
if I do, because you're paying out of pocket, until you reach that higher deductible. So you need some kind of funds to be able to take care of it if needed. So, nothing ever, I never incurred any expenses that I couldn't just pay out of pocket. So it continued to grow. I never took a penny out of the health savings account. I was maxing that thing out from like 2008 to 2019. I maxed it out. It was invested index fund. It was
Yep.
total stock market index fund. I think it might have been VTA. I know it was a Vanguard index fund. So so those were three things already: the health savings account, the Roth IRA, and the traditional IRA. And I think for a part of the time I was doing like a 529, especially like when my daughter was a minor. So some of her child support, I was trying to, get it funneled into the 529 as much as I could. I don't even count that as part of my net worth, but those were three big accounts that
Mhm.
accounted for what was it, 19,000 for the 401k, 6,000 for the Roth IRA, and like 7,000 for the health savings account. And so that's where the bulk of it went. For the investment club, that was a small amount. That was like $100 a month. So that wasn't a huge amount. But yeah, that's kind of how it breaks out.
Okay, and just for anybody who doesn't know what these funds are, a 401k or 403b, those are basically accounts where let's just throw a round number out there. You make $100,000 a year. As of this year, you can max it out at $19,500. So that basically makes your taxable income. It will take it from $100,000 to $81,500, $80,500. So that money grows tax free, tax deferred, and then you take it out and you pay taxes on it as you take it out. With a
Right.
Roth IRA, that's basically after tax dollars. So that grows tax free. And
Right.
if I'm not mistaken, you can take it out, as long as you take it out after 59 and a half, you don't have to pay any penalty on it. But there are if you buy a house or something like that, you don't have to worry about paying a penalty on it.
Yeah, and let me make this one clarification because seems like when most even professionals explain it, a lot of people miss this piece. But with a Roth IRA, the money that you put in, your contributions, let's say you put in $5,000, the money you put in, you can always take out
Yeah.
at any time for anything, both tax and penalty free. Not
Yeah.
that you should because it's for long-term money, but just know that because things happen, and I just want people to have all the right information. So with a Roth IRA, that's a nice little feature to have available to you.
Yeah, it's a really good way to supplement all of the pre-tax money that you put
Right.
in, so that's a great point. And then the HSA that you invest in, the HSA has like triple tax benefits. And
Yeah.
I guess I don't have the time to really go over that right now. But yeah, and I
Well,
think
triple track just means, it's tax free going in, tax free while it grows, and tax free on the back end. The other two that you mentioned, like a traditional 401k or an Roth IRA, you're going to pay tax either in the beginning or the end.
yep.
The HSA is unique because you don't pay taxes at the beginning or the end or the middle, and that's why they
Yeah.
call it triple tax savings, as long as at the end you obviously use it for
Medical.
qualified medical expenses, which is a very extensive list, by the way.
Oh yeah, it is. And even if you, so let's say you have a $5,000 procedure now,
Right.
and you save that receipt in 30 or 40 years, if I'm not mistaken, you could still use that receipt to get reimbursed for that
Yeah.
$5,000. So
Exactly. There's no time limit, and you just keep digital files. We all have different folders and files, and that's all I do for mine. Whenever it's a health savings account expense, even if I pay out of pocket, that digital receipt is being saved, and I flip it right into my folder for health savings. So anytime I want to take that money out, and obviously it works. It will work great for me now because I'm not working, and if I happen to need money for anything that I wanted to, and I wanted to take it out of my health savings account. Right now, I probably have about enough receipts to support maybe around $10,000 or something like that. But right now, it's still growing.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, before we talk about tax rate and savings rate, we want to have a little bit of time for Q&A later. So if you want to come to the YouTube side and post some questions, we will give Jackie a chance to answer some of those. So at your peak, what was the highest savings rate that you had, and how low were you able to get the tax rate?
Okay, so as far as my savings rate, before I came in contact with the FIRE movement, I did not even keep up with my savings rate, and I kind of had to back into it. So I was adding up those accounts. I mean, I think, and it would depend on what kind of year I was having, right? Like if I was in a lower income year, like $65,000, $70,000, then the percentage of savings might seem different than if I was making a little bit more. But I was always somewhere between like 40 to 45%, something like that. But that also most of that allowed me to reduce my taxes, meaning there was more money going in my pocket and less money going to the tax man. And if I had to do if I had to think about something I wish I would have done a lot better, it probably would have been with taxes and understanding how valuable taxes can be. You have people saying, oh, you should not spend $5 on that latte and it'll add up to this, or that. I'm looking for the big stuff. Taxes is the big stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I could save $5,000 or $6,000 on taxes just by contributing to my 401k and my HSA, and I've gotten that in one big swoop. So
Yeah.
I'm always looking for the big things as far as saving on taxes or whatever. And I finally went back and I recreated, what I was paying in tax. I never paid attention to my taxes. I would just look at, here's my refund, and that's it.
Yeah.
But when I went back and I looked at my effective tax rate, I was doing pretty good. But for 2020, okay, we had this bad coronavirus year and everything, I was able to get my tax rate down to 0%.
I
And
saw that somewhere.
yeah,
Whoa.
only from learning about how these taxes work did I figure out how to do all of that. But yeah, I ended up with a 0% effective tax rate for 2020. So that's the lowest I got it. And if I'm lucky, maybe I could be able to do it for 2021 as well.
That's incredible. How did you do that? Just maxing everything out that you had an opportunity to
Well,
max out?
for 2020, I couldn't max things out. You know why? Because I didn't have hardly any earned income.
Yeah, true.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I have a little side business, but maybe I made about $5,000 last year. And, when as far as looking at taxes, when you have a small business or whatever, you take whatever your income was and you deduct the expenses. And that's the amount that's considered earned income for the purposes of being able to contribute to some of these retirement accounts. So I was only able to contribute $2,000 last year into a retirement account because you have to have earned income.
Yeah.
So I was very strategic in where I pull the money from. Let's say, for instance, some of the money came from a regular brokerage account. And when you're pulling money from a brokerage account, the only part that's taxable is the growth.
Mhm.
So if I pulled out $20,000 and 12,000 was my contributions, that's not taxable. Only the 8,000 worth of growth. And the same with my investment club money. Even though I might have taken out $10,000, only a portion of that is taxable. And then I could have gotten money out of my Roth IRA if I wanted to, but 2020 was unique. So I was able to pull straight out of my traditional IRA because they had the coronavirus, where one of the coronavirus relief provisions said that you could take money out of a retirement account and not pay the penalty. I'm like, perfect for me. And, they had all these rules, like you needed to have COVID, a family member, all these different things. And the last thing it said was, or if you were in any way economically impacted by COVID. I'm like, who wasn't economically impacted by COVID? So I'm like, oh, box check, So yeah. And again, if you didn't catch all that, there's a lot of moving parts, but I felt good that I was able to kind of figure this out because if I would have done things in a different order or taken from other accounts, I might have had more than a 0% tax rate. But again, I'm trying to work smart and not work hard.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about the 25 times, or also known as the 4% rule? So how do you budget, or when you finally turn in that letter of resignation, you had confidence that you're going to make this money stretch to the day you're no longer here? How do you do that? Like, what's your plan now?
Yeah. Well, I think I was more concerned about like right after. So 2019, which was the year that I retired, I knew that I didn't want anything to come between me and my early retirement. So I made sure I had at least 3 years worth of living expenses in cash, or at least liquid and out of the stock market. Okay. Now we had a really good year in 2019. I think the S&P 500 was up like 31%. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, in January of 2020, I'm thinking, geez, I missed out on that 30% growth, with this money. But then coronavirus, in March. Right. And I'm like, okay, that's a good reminder of why I needed this in cash. So I didn't want, I wanted to make sure I was okay. And again, you kind of got to look at your situation. So normally I wouldn't want that much in cash, but for what I was doing, I knew I needed to make that money accessible. And I didn't want to have to cash anything out at a bad time just because I needed the money. So that's what I set up for the first 3 years. But the 25 times your expenses, that's what's called, the FI number. And my expenses were roughly between like $40,000 and $45,000. I tacked on an extra $5,000 for health insurance because that was one of my biggest fears. Yeah. But so if you take $40,000 and you multiply it by 25, that gives you $1 million. So that was pretty much my FI number, the point in which I could say I can live off of these investments by drawing or drawing out just 4% a year. In my mind, I knew I would want less than that, but so I continued to let my nest egg grow, and I continued to work for 2 more years. So I think it got me to like 1.2, 1.3 million. So I was probably down to like a 3.5% withdrawal rate. And a lot of times the 4% rule is now referred to as the 4% rule of thumb, meaning that it's somewhere around there. But if the Trinity study says if you withdraw 4% of your portfolio, it should last you forever. Now, I'm retiring much earlier than what that study is sort of created around. So I knew that I wanted to not have to take off 4%. And on top of that, I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to do once I retired. Now, not all of it, is going to be, income necessarily, but financial literacy was like my life's work. And certainly some of the work that I'm doing would command, some type of pay, some type of income. So I knew that that would be a supplement. And I feel like a lot of people kind of miss out on the value of human capital, right? Us retiring so young, we have that human capital. Like if a 70-year-old is retiring, the idea of them getting a side gig or going back to work might not be an option. But if you're doing it 40, 50, 60 years old, you just have maybe more income earning opportunity from a side gig, a project, a job, consulting, or whatever. So I always knew that I'm not just going to sit still and watch the grass grow, right? I knew something would come in. So I probably wouldn't have to do that 4%. But we'll see. I mean, that's worst case scenario. I wanted to make sure that if I didn't make another penny, that I would be okay with living off of my investments, with nothing else coming in, but what my investments are throwing off.
Those you dropped some gems. That's some real good information. If anybody listen, I mean you just have helped to set people up for the rest of their lives if they pay any attention whatsoever.
Good.
So you became a millionaire, and I just want you to go back and think about the first net worth statement you ever did, because I know that the most powerful day that I had in my financial journey was the day that our net worth went to zero. Like, it had been red for so long, we got to $0 net worth. That was powerful. So tell us about the first time you actually were conscious of your net worth.
Yeah, well, Sean, I think it's crazy that we never hear about a net worth or what that even is until we are full-grown adults. Like, calculating a net worth is so simple that we should be teaching this in high school for sure. And that's just your assets minus your liabilities. Assets are your retirement account, the money you have in a bank, and then you subtract what you owe, your car loan, a mortgage on a house or something like that. And that's a net worth. And so I had never done one. Even after I got divorced and I had those, moments of, just financial shame, I still didn't do a net worth. I think I was like around 30. Well, I know the year was 2013, that I did my first net worth statement. And I'm pulling together all my accounts. I'm taking my time to do it because I'm actually enjoying the exercise, because I guess there are certain accounts where I wasn't even thinking about them in terms of this is my money. Like, when you've got that money coming out of your 401k, you almost don't feel like it's yours. So I'm pulling all these together. And the first time I did that, I felt very powerful that I knew where my numbers were. I knew that it gave me confirmation that some of the things I'd been doing were right, because up to that moment, I just thought I was doing the right thing, but I didn't have a whole lot of confidence. And so I can say that doing a net worth statement was probably the most powerful exercise I had ever done with my finances. So if there's any takeaway tonight, I would say find a little time in your life to be able to put together your net worth statement. And even if it's negative, even if it's in the red, honestly, most people's are when they're just sitting down to do it, right? Even if it's in the red, think of how powerful you're going to feel as you move the needle in the right direction. And you just know where you're at. And this takes into account all the things you got going on in your life, not just a budget, not just cash flow, not just your debt, but net worth reflects all of that. So that is, an exercise is definitely worth doing if you want to try to figure out where you're at and where you're starting.
I agree 1,000%. And there are so many different methods. You can do a paper and pen, you can do Excel, you can do personal capital, so many options out there. And like I said, when we got to zero net worth and I was able to see it, it was powerful. So hey, real quick, there's a single mom out there, a single dad out there who want to get started on this journey. What are your 6 steps to wealth that anybody can follow and become wealthy?
Yeah, I've probably got more than 6, but if I had to boil it down to something, I would say I always kind of like to start with the behavioral side of things and the way you think. And sometimes the way you think is dependent on what you're surrounding yourself with. So these days with technology, you can easily go to that, Our Rich Journey video on YouTube and watch how he talks about fire. Like you said, never talk about money. But it's the mindset and the freedom to be able to go, pick blueberries and just play around with your kid and just to be able to do all these things. Because for most people, that's inspiring enough to say, you know what, I would like that one day. So let me sit down and see what I need to do to get there, or to at least push me in the right direction. So the mindset part is very important, the behavioral part and things like that. And sometimes the behavior is hard to change, but the first step is just kind of recognizing it and then, going from there. And so, once you kind of get in your head that, okay, I think this is possible. I've been listening to these different people and I've been sort of getting into the weeds and figuring out, is it possible? Here's what it would look like for me. So once you start doing that, then you can go back to the nuts and bolts. Most people, I have a lot of people asking me, what's the best way to start investing? And typically for most people, that's going to be your employer sponsored plan. Why? Because it's automatic, comes out of your paycheck, and usually there's a company match. So, and when I say your employer, I try to say that generically because it just depends. So if you're in the military, so big ups to our military people, it's the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan. If you're a teacher or you work for a state government, that's probably going to be a 403B or possibly a 457. If you work for a private company, like I did, it's going to be a 401k. So typically the employer sponsored plan is going to be the way to start. And then kind of look at what you're invested in. And there's a lot of content out there that can tell you, hey, a straight up index fund will probably get it done. If you got a long time horizon, a stock index fund will probably get it done. Rashad, you mentioned VTSAX. That's not the only one. You hear that the most, but there's plenty other providers. There's Fidelity, Schwab, that has low cost index fund. When I say low, let me go ahead and quantify that. I'm talking 0.05 or 0.04 or 0.03. They are that low now.
Absolutely.
So you're already started on your way to investing because you just started the most valuable wealth building tool, and that's time. So it's going to compound over time just by you starting. So even if you feel like you can only do 1% or you can only do the company match, that will get you in the right direction and it will get you started. So that's a big thing. But also just kind of being conscientious about where you're spending your money. And you don't be hard on yourself when you do that. Just look at, okay, the things I'm spending money on, are they things that I want to spend money on, or I just didn't realize I was spending money on? For instance, an overdraft charge is $35. I guarantee you nobody wanted to spend $35 to do that. But when you start sort of looking at your cash flow and where your money's going, it might plant a seed to say, oh no, I'm never giving the bank $35 again. And that'll just, kind of change things for you a little bit. But just figure out where the breadcrumbs are dropping from, right? We don't need somebody else, snatching our crumbs, right? We want the crumbs so they can compound and grow. So that's a big thing too. Know where your money's at, where it's going. And I guess I'll end with the start a net worth statement and make sure you get the full picture of what you got going on. And none of this has to be done overnight. And there doesn't even have to be any immediate action. Your win is the fact that you sat down and did it, right? It doesn't mean that you need to be superwoman or and have everything happen overnight. And I guess I thought about one other thing that I just got to mention, because I tell my daughter all the time. It's like, figure out what your superpower is. Like, we're all good at something. We're all not so good at something else. But do you want to focus and spend time on the things that you're good at, or, lament over the things that you're not? So think about the things that you are really, really good at. Like for me, I was always better at saving and investing. I was horrible at budgeting. Yeah. So the way I did my budget, I did it backwards. I said, okay, I'm saving this, this, and that. So when I deduct that from a paycheck, this is what I got left. So I guess that's my budget. So figure out what you are good at, not just financial stuff, but other things that you might be able to make an income from. A lot of people love real estate. If you love real estate, then that could be, a tool for you. So think about what your superpower is and know that we all have a superpower. And I think it's a pretty fun exercise to kind of discover what your superpower is.
I agree. I really do. And I want to piggyback on one thing you said. So I previously did a video about the hedonic treadmill, and it kind of matches what you said. If you know going into a situation that I'm going to buy this $50,000 car and trade in my $10,000 car, but you know that 2 weeks later, you're not going to be as happy with that purchase, it's going to make you think twice about whether or not you really need that $50,000 car. And if you do that with anything, then you have an opportunity to save quite a bit of money. Right. Before we move on and end this, I had one question we have time for one question from Lena White. I had no earned income 2020 through March 2021, yet I was able to put $9,000 in a Roth IRA. I don't know how you can do 9,000 in a Roth.
Yeah, I think the limit is 6.
Yeah, 6, and I think 7,000 if you're like 55.
If you're over 50, right?
Yeah, she said, what would be the smartest way to get out of this?
Oh, she said she did it by mistake.
Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah. Oh, I think right? She might have a chance to return the $3,000, right?
I think she can. So, when she says 9,000, maybe she meant between the 2 years. Like between
Possibly. Oh, yeah.
between
Okay. Yeah.
2019 and 2020.
Yeah, because she didn't have earned income for like a year and a half. So
Okay.
yeah, you know what? I'll probably give contact information, just to see exactly what she means.
Okay.
And yeah, we could figure that out. My email is thewealthyeducator@gmail.com. So if she shoots me an email, we could look into that and kind of figure out what
Yeah.
she's talking about.
And the one thing I'll say to her is that we all make mistakes. Now you're trying to fix it. We'll get it right. So there's not hardly anything. There's nothing out there really that's not reversible. So there's a way to do it or whatever.
Yeah, and like you said, people make mistakes, and the only time people really get in trouble with the IRS is trying to commit fraud or to hide mistakes.
Right. When it's a mistake, there's hardly any penalty except a way to, fix the issue once you discover it. Because, honestly, the whole tax return system and IRS, it's all on the honor system anyway, right?
Yeah.
Only if you get audited is it an issue, but you definitely want to try to correct it. But like I said, everything has a solution. So
yeah, we could steer her in the right direction. If she gets in touch with
sure.
me, I won't give her any advice, but I'll definitely say, hey, this is what you should look towards doing, or who you should see. Now, I know an hour and 5 or hour 10 minutes isn't nearly enough time to really get the knowledge that you've dropped. There are quite a few videos of you out there. So if you all Google Jackie Cummings Koski, you'll get so much. There's so much information out there on YouTube or on the internet. Can you also give more information about where people can find you and what you're doing now, how you can help them?
Yeah. So right now I am in a master's program. So that keeps me busy, but finally I get to go to school and not have to work, right? Like I did for undergrad. You can find me on Instagram, just about anywhere on the major media platform. Just type in Jackie Cummings Koski and you can find me. And I'm not really creating a whole lot of content on my own. Like I have projects that I'm working on that are just not necessarily finished yet. But what I do appreciate doing is joining people like Rashad on their platform. And I don't mind sharing my story. I think sometimes it gets a lot of attention because I'm one of the few people that's willing to share my numbers. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So normally what I've been doing lately is just sort of sharing my story, my knowledge with any content creators, especially Black content creators, because like I said, I feel like we're kind of coming late to the table. So I'm trying to share as much information as I can, but I am on the social media platforms. I'm probably not as active on those platforms as I should, but probably Instagram is the best one. I'm liking that platform now. But yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out, but I would just encourage you, if you're learning about FIRE and it's making sense to you and you've gained a level of knowledge where you can be valuable to other people, please share it. Please bring more of us into the fold. And this is our community. And for us to learn, sometimes this has to be someone, that's adjacent to us, that's close to us or whatever. So I want to inspire that, is for us to, talk about, becoming financially independent and changing, that cycle of poverty, and talking about something that is going to help us, for generations to come. So yeah, feel free to connect with me and let's just keep talking about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just Lena did clarify that it was a mistake between those 2 years. So I know she can go to a website, Bogleheads, BOGLEHEADS.com. Bogleheads, that's named after Jack Bogle from Vanguard. And there's so much good content there. I get a lot of my information from there. Or you can shoot me an email and then we'll work through it together. But hey, I want to thank you, Jackie, for coming onto the platform. Anybody who watched this live on Facebook, please go over to the YouTube channel, Wealth Building Educator, and subscribe and share this video. There's a lot of other good content out there as well with FIRE contributors, JL Collins, Rich and Regular. There's plenty of good content we're putting out. I really appreciate you all for tuning in. And Jackie, once again, I appreciate you very much. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Rashad. It's been amazing. Thank you for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Keep up the good work, okay?
All right, you too.
All right, take care.